He's never letting go of that rope. It doesn't matter how much these guys want to tug. He's never, ever, ever, ever letting go of that rope. And I don't understand, irrespective of how people feel about him on a personal level, I still don't see how common sense hasn't prevailed.
What up? Welcome back for another episode of the Bitstocks podcast, coming at you from the Bitstocks London office on yet another Friday evening, because we love podcasts on Friday evenings. And there's a whole lot we want to discuss. I'm joined by the usual co-host,
Stephen Ierotheou.
And yeah, guys, so before we dive in, usual stuff, please do not consider any of this as investment, financial, tax, or any form of advice. There will be a few links in the description, so very important dates coming up for you to know about. CoinGeek London, 28th to 30th of November. We will be there. The link is in the description for you to register for tickets. We'll be revealing our new ecosystem that we've been working away at for the expansion plans, new services and jurisdictions from Bitstocks, and CEO Michael Hudson. He'll be speaking there on the 30th of November, which is the final big day, the big reveal. So tickets, link will be in description. And the next big event after that, I believe, will be the 11th of December. There is a Bitstocks meetup. Link for that will also be in the description. That one is free. And the next one will be 20th of December at Hedge Brunch in Hay Hill, Mayfair. Michael Hudson will be on the panel, and you'll catch myself, Stephen, a couple of the other Bitstocks family members in the crowd. And we'll also be talking more about the blockchain space and revealing our new ecosystem and platform. Now, Stephen, mate, how have you been doing the last couple of days with the whole BCH protocol upgrade?
In short, I'm losing hair. It's been really exciting for us, and the fact that there has never really been anything like this. The last fork with Bitcoin, obviously splitting and producing Bitcoin Cash, was nothing like this. It's a growing experience. It's a learning curve for all of us. At the same time, we're doing a tremendous amount of research just to make sure we are actually on top of everything. I know the guys are probably bursting to sort of hit us with the knowledge. But it's been all-nighters for us. I mean, in the vlogs, I'm sure you can see all of us around Elia's, around Michael's, just having fun with it. But it's a great experience.
Yeah, definitely. So let's dive in. We've got absolute knowledge powerhouse right in front of us here. Well, Michael Hudson, you all know. Elia, head of OTC, you all know. But you've never met before our CTO, Davo.
It's more David, but okay.
Really?
My nickname is Davo. And my full name is David Arakelian.
Cool, mate.
Or Khabib.
Oh, Khabib.
Yeah, Khabib.
That's the internal
That's one in the office.
Cool.
Thanks for
And
hosting.
you, how long have you been with the Bitstocks family? Because the man behind the engine, the platform right here, and a lot of behind the scenes that you don't get to actually see the graph that goes into it.
Overall, I would say around 4 to 5 years.
Yeah.
But have been working very extensively for the last 2 years.
Beautiful. Cool. So guys, let's dive in, because I know you will have a lot to say.
Where do we start?
That's exactly the question.
Genuinely, where do we start?
Okay, I think the first place it is that we should start is actually clarifying some of the distortions that are out there, right? Everyone thinks that this is an opportunity for free coins. Let's be honest, the vast majority of this market is retail investor driven. Vast majority of retail investors predominantly utilize events like this for the chance of getting some free coins. And we saw the spike up from $415, $420 leading up to $650 on the announcement that it looked like these chains were going to diverge and split. And that shows you clearly the vast majority of the space, their incentives are misaligned with what this space is really all about. Then the next thing is, these are the same people who are going to hit Twitter with the trolls, say decentralization, centralization, this fake Toshi, that no one's actually really doing proper due diligence or proper critical thinking. So I think the first thing we should clarify is this a chain split? How does this actually look? What are the scenarios, right?
Yeah. So, my opinion, this is not a chain split. What we've got is two implementations of a blockchain competing to becoming the dominant implementation. We've got ABC, who are competing with SV. These are two people who are willing now and putting money on the table. They've put hash power on the table. They're putting everything to become the dominant Bitcoin Cash chain. the big misunderstanding and what exchanges are doing, listing it by separating BCH SV, BCH ABC. They're putting two implementations and giving them price tickers, where these are two development groups. Yes, they disagree, but the way that's actually solved is by Nakamoto consensus. Longest chain, most proof of work wins. This is not going to cause a chain split. We have no replay protection. This could get very messy for people who don't understand what's actually going on.
And that's a really important point, right? Because people assume opinion matters. What are you backing your opinion with? What money have you put on the table? What are you staking? What is your economic tie to that action? And this is where so much misunderstanding is out there about how the integrity of the Bitcoin network actually works. People don't really understand Bitcoin. Experts in this space that we are outsourcing our critical thinking to don't understand Bitcoin. And we believe that just because someone has 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 200, 800,000 followers, that this person must understand Bitcoin. Fundamentally incorrect. And we're seeing this with key figureheads in the space like Roger Ver, a plethora of people on the Bitcoin Core side, even people within Bitcoin Unlimited, Bitcoin ABC. There's so much misinformation being perpetuated out there because they actually fundamentally have a misunderstanding as to what this network really is and how this network really works. Now, maybe a complete misunderstanding is a strong statement. Perhaps it's one of these two scenarios. One is they actually really do understand this, but their agenda is of a negative polarity. So they're going to spread misinformation out there, a lot of fear and a lot of FUD, and try and control the narrative. The other is they genuinely don't know what they're talking about. And I think there's a lot of credence in the second scenario as well. So there's some things that I would like to clarify as we go through this podcast. One of it, let's focus on the incentives. So one side, you've got Satoshi's vision. What is Satoshi's vision really all about? That is going back to essentially the beginning and maintaining what we all got into this space for, okay? And what is that? The reason why we all got into this space isn't because the buzzword that has become decentralization and blockchain. Blockchain is just a ledger. What does that ledger actually do at the most primitive level? It provides us sight. Why is that important to have sight? Why is it important to have sight? Well, if you take the traditional ecosystem today, the traditional economic system today, and it forms this global pyramid of power, right? The problem is that we don't have sight of the ledger, the central bank. We don't even have sight of what Barclays ledger is if you bank with Barclays. The only sight you have is your own personal ledger, right? You cannot trace it back up the chain. So who do you rely on to provide you sight? Auditing agencies, media, educational system. I've outsourced my eyes for someone else to tell me what I'm seeing or what has been seen, okay? Ironically, that has parallels with SegWit, but maybe that's a different conversation. So at the most primitive level, the reason why Bitcoin is important to the world is that should anyone have a negative polarity or positive polarity, we can witness the evidence of the agenda and of the polarity, and then we can address it. This is the core of what Bitcoin is. And people take the concept and the buzzword of decentralization as a be-all and end-all. This is why they start making retarded arguments about Raspberry Pis and about having more nodes on the network that aren't actually doing anything. A miner who is economically incentivized, who invests in hundreds of millions, deserves to protect the integrity of their investment. Everyone is afforded that opportunity. That is the aspect that's decentralized in Bitcoin. Equal access, equal rights to compete. That is decentralized in Bitcoin. The rest of it is about sight. So if Craig and the SV side claim dominion over the chain and then start exerting malicious behavior, playing around with people's money and all the rest of it, reversing time, then we have evidence through sight that this has happened. This is what people need to hone in on, and this is what people need to focus on.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with that because me personally, you probably remember this. We was given a task to come up with different ideas. Okay, why is 1 megabyte block not sufficient? Why do we need a block size increase? What are we going to do here? And we were starting to model out different things. My first thing, what I did, I said, oh, it's great. 1 megabyte blocks. You can run it on a Raspberry Pi. And I actually put that down. I actually sent that to Michael. I was like, great advantage. Anybody can run a node. All you need to do is use a Raspberry Pi, a little £30 computer with an SD card. Great. You're running a node. You're supporting a network. But when you actually think about it, and when we're looking at it a little bit more, what are you giving to the network by running this Raspberry Pi? What benefit are you providing? And that is when I actually understood, and the more I was looking into it, nodes that subscribe to the ledger are the ones that matter. Every other node, great, you're running a full node, but you cannot change the ledger. All you are taking is information given to you by miners, and then you're going to then spread that to everybody else. But you have no right to change the ledger, alter the ledger. So technically, what are you doing for the network? If you wanted to be supportive, maybe you should invest a little bit more and then become one of these nodes that can subscribe to the ledger. And this is a big misconception that we're seeing in this space.
And just to touch on that one point, and then we can go around and get other people's thoughts, but that's a really important point, because what the miner's role is to do is to establish the outer ring of the network, the heartbeat that beats every 10 minutes, pumps blood flow into the network. SPV's job is to create density within the network. Pies don't do that. There's no point you running a Pi at home. Who else are you connecting to that Pi? No one. What density are you helping the network build? None. What is your role? What is your role? You have no role. An SPV, we run SPVs here. Why are we running SPV? Because we're a business. What is our role as a business? To create additional connections to our SPV. We're building density in a network by running SPV. Am I inscribing data to the blockchain? No. I'm building density. That's my role. I'm economically incentivized to build density because I want more clients. I want more customers. I want to connect the world to banking solutions, right? So the outer rings have their role, and they are the ones who are economically incentivized to provide the heartbeat and ensure that the heartbeat is pumping for the right polarity. This is how the network works. Everything else is distortion, completely and utterly distortion.
Yeah, I appreciate, obviously, already we've dropped a lot of knowledge bombs. Going back to your point about the 1 megabyte blocks and just touching on block size. So myself and Stephen, on the last podcast episode, we briefly touched on the block sizes and the arguments against an increase in block size to 128 megabytes, 512 next May, 2 gig next November, and so on and so forth. The arguments against these. So it's basically as if you're saying, we know that right now, because the argument is there aren't enough transactions going through, there's no need for an upgrade. But it's like, no, there is a need for an upgrade because we anticipate the requirement for this in future.
We've seen it.
And exactly. And we've seen the stress tests, and it's like, would it not be better to do it now when there aren't as many transactions going through as in the future? Because in the future, the analogy that we said before is like a car's moving on a motorway and 100 miles an hour and you're trying to change the tires versus it's now moving at 2 miles an hour and you can kind of,
you can
it's easier,
park up, you can get your jack out, and you can start making some upgrades. I mean, we've seen it in December when the network was being utilized. We as a company, we spent $30,000 in fees on the network.
It was a brutal day.
On fees. We had to make a decision, and then we essentially, the miners and the network and these people who didn't want to upgrade BTC, they had our balls in their hands. What could we do? We couldn't risk, what we were doing at that time. So we made a decision and we paid those fees.
Did your balls fit in Jihan's hands?
No comment. I would like to join on 3 parts. One is Michael started by saying we're going to talk about the fork. I think actually this is not really a fork either. I genuinely think this is a consensus mechanism that has never been tested yet. Yeah. This is something very important. Like, this is really and truly shaping the future of the Bitcoin, I think. A lot of people talk about Nakamoto consensus. They talk about different ways of qualifying what Bitcoin is, how conflict should be resolved. But none of this has been tested this way. And this is truly an excellent time to be alive, to monitor and see how things are going to go. I'm really excited, to be honest, because this is truly competing. 2 different chains have been formed, but they are not different. They are just the same chain having a hash word per se to gain the majority of the chain. And that will become just a single chain. This is how the survival of the chain will be. In terms of what Elia was mentioning about the 1 megabytes block limitation, which we are seeing and are enforced on a Bitcoin core network. So that just goes beyond stupidity, to be honest. There are even some developers, core developers, who are advocating for less than 1 megabyte, 300 kilobytes. I can name one, which is, I think, Luke Jr. He is just worried that there's too much hard drive spaces to be to be used. Genuinely, the concerns that he has are nothing to be worried about, especially in nowadays that we have so much cheap hardware and network available for us. The third point that I wanted to talk about is the community and the maturity of the community, how they are reacting within this fork situation that we are having. So, yes, Michael, you did say that we have people out there which have a lot of followers on Twitter, and most of them, they're talking rubbish. But unfortunate situation is that a lot of people follow those people and they take what they say for the truth. And that divides the community within, and it just creates unnecessary division between us. And that is a major issue for me.
Yeah. Because to add to that, this is not unique to crypto. It really isn't. It's just that the crypto community really is in its adolescent stages, that the tactics of divide and conquer are just so beautifully conducive to this industry. And that is ultimately and fundamentally what has been happening. So, and we see this in every other fabric of our society. We see religious divide, we see political divide, we see gender divide. We see all of these different mechanisms where separatism is fed into the fabrics of society. And this is where I think people in the crypto space are incredibly naive, in the sense that not believing that these tactics will not be applied to us. That's very naive, because why are we here? We're here to reinvent what one of the secondary conditions of what it is to be human, how we measure our time and our skill. That's what money is. It's a measurement of time and skill. So if we're saying that we're going to re-engineer that measurement, okay, well, what was the first iteration? Whose system is it that you are replacing? You're replacing a central banking system, the globalist system. Something that many people who within this community will say is a very dark, corrupt system. Okay, that is the stronghold that underpins the fabric, which is the modern human condition. And we're saying that we're going to replace that, and we're acting around airy-fairy, childish, talking rubbish on podcast in your hotel room with alcohol and promoting drugs. It's like, what the hell? These are the people that we believe are going to change the balance that has been unchallenged in thousands of years? Come on, grow up. And this is why we have to start coming out with hard messages. This is also why I think, for the most part, the community is ostracizing Craig Wright. Is because if you focus on what he says at a really primitive level, he speaks an incredible amount of sense. How he delivers it, which is what creates the distortions, and people base it on his delivery and not the actual core resonance of what it is that he is saying. And we're going to go through these cycles. And I think this is one of the things that most certainly here at Bitstocks, I most certainly want to do my role in addressing, is just getting some cold, hard information out there and facts out there, and challenging people not to take our word as gospel. Go out there and actually do your due diligence and check if what it is that we are saying, what we're discussing on this podcast actually checks out. This is a healthy thing for everyone to do in the crypto community. You have to do your own due diligence. And once you've gone through that process and this person checks out, maybe you could be a little bit more relaxed in doing all the DD on everything that person says, and you can move on to the next. Because this is what it means to be educated. You have two forms, two variants of knowledge. Outer knowledge, inner knowledge. Outer knowledge is the encapsulation of information from other beings into one. This is governed by time. You have 80 years to do that. The internet accelerated this process, right? The second is inner knowledge. Once you've acquired enough outer knowledge, you do some internal work. You consult your own discernment. This is the vibe I feel a lot of us at Bitstocks are now operating on, which is why I'm not very active on Twitter. You guys aren't necessarily active on these social media platforms. Yes, we need to be because we want to connect with our communities and we want to connect with the global community, but we're not there to aid our own discernment. We're there to put information out there and challenge people to do their own research if what it is that we're saying actually does check out. This is one of the things I think the crypto community over time is just going to have to grow up and accept and address. And the business agenda is really coming in now. And I think because of the immaturity that we've had in the space, which hasn't got us to global mainstream adoption in 10 years, like we should be ready by now. We've had 10 years and we're not ready. And then we want to bitch, cry, and moan when logical business acumen comes into this space and says, look, you have to factor what you can't see, because this is what's going on right now. Amory, ABC, and that camp is saying, and solid argument, 32 megabytes is more than enough right now. We're doing like 200 kilobyte blocks. He has a legitimate point. This is a factual point. He's not wrong on this point. But what he is not factoring in, what he cannot see. Simple example. You have mind, body, soul complex. This is what it is to be human. The body complex we can all see. And we could all go to the gym, we could pump our weights, right? The mind and soul, you can't. You can split your head open, you maybe see the mind, but you definitely ain't going to see the soul. So just because you can't see it, is it not there? No. Focus on a body complex. Breathing. 50% of your lungs are outside of your body. You breathe in oxygen. You emit CO2. Trees emit oxygen. They ingest CO2. So on that simple primitive logic, do I have to convince everyone in this room and listening to this podcast we probably shouldn't cut down all the trees? No, because 50% of our lungs are outside of our bloody body. So going back to the original point with Amory and 32 megabyte blocks, his point is logical because he's analyzing the body. And I think he's pretty good at analyzing the body. However, what he can't see is Facebook, big business. If you factor Facebook and you want to put that on the blockchain, every interaction is a transaction. Every like, every upload, every comment is a transaction. Facebook, in blockchain terms, will be millions of transactions per second. Bitcoin Cash right now, what's 32 megabytes in terms of transactions per second right now?
It's almost as PayPal right now. If you fulfill 32 megs, it will be the same amount as transaction as PayPal.
Is that a couple hundred a second?
No, it's more than that, I
1,000,
think.
right? A few thousand.
Yeah. So on that basis, is Facebook going to look at Bitcoin and think, should we start making some engineering choices? Should we start allocating some resources? No. And Amory can't factor that in. ABC cannot factor that in because they can't see what they can't see. They're not even factoring in what they can't see. They're not comprehending it because they don't operate on a holistic whole. There's too much separatism, fragmentation in their thought process. This is, again, the problem. The SV camp has a very holistic view. They factor in what you cannot be seen. They factor in the variables and they account for those variables. So their argument is we need unlimited blocks. That's what we need to get to. Because how can you say confidently that you're already wired into the hive mind on this planet and that you know what every single person on this planet actually really wants? No. Open it up. Let free markets be free markets. Let consciousness be consciousness.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think to address the question you guys have answered, is it a chain split? I don't think it's a chain split. I think it's something unique, like David mentioned. But what I think is interesting is the vast majority of the space are retail investors. And I think the vast majority of those retail investors are hypocrites, because these are the same people saying, we're going to Bitcoin because we don't like how certain individuals have the power to print more money, essentially QE. Now, Michael brought the point on that people are seeing this fork as free money. That's the exact same as QE. If you look at some chain splits, it's the exact same. People just want free tokens. That is all it is. Now, how can we sort of combat that? I think the only way to combat that is through education. Now, education comes, but a way to combat that also is through regulation. You only get regulation under providing that you can classify these assets. You can't classify them at the minute because of the volatility. That goes back to why there's not mainstream adoption. And mainstream adoption will only come after they are classified and after we build regulation. So in essence, it's a bit of a tricky one, but education is at the forefront of this. And without the community being educated, following 19, 20-year-olds on Twitter and taking their word as gospel, the space can't flourish, in my opinion. You need to educate. You need to spread the word, the true word, and give people a fair platform where they can actually pitch their ideas and people can vote and consensus.
But to be fair, just to add on that, I completely agree. But there is one more method, and it's the CSW method. You whack them over the head with a sledgehammer, and you just aggressively compete. And you know what? I'm not going to say I agree with a methodology of how he's deploying his strategy. I don't agree with all of it, but the core resonance and the core principle as to what it is that he's doing is incredibly profound. Incredibly profound. Do you understand the level of what is really going on right now? You have some big agendas at play. You've got a Chinese influence. And we don't know how deep that goes. We don't know who the majority shareholder of Bitmain really is. We don't know. I don't know how deep that agenda goes. I know a lot about China and the government and what really actually goes on. And then you've got the other side with Blockstream, AXA, the banks, etc. and stuff behind, who implemented SegWit, which I would consider a virus on the Bitcoin network, which has degraded enough cells that prevent you from doing other activities. People don't know this. This is, again, the 300-pound bodybuilder in the gym everyone thinking that person's healthy, but tips over, passes out, and has a heart attack in the gym. And everyone's like, oh my God, that person was in such great shape. This is Bitcoin right now. It's $5,500 big bodybuilder in the gym, but you can't see the arteries are clogging up. And this is the thing, and this is what's going on. So this is why I think what Enchain, Craig Wright, SV, CoinGeek are doing right now, once time has been applied and looked back retrospectively, it's going to be considered a very noble action, an incredibly noble action.
And I mean, one thing we have to do as well, we have to look at, right now, if we look at the traditional space, let's look at traditional corporate structures. When someone has a disagreement, exactly what David said, right now we're testing the consensus mechanism of crypto as a whole. When two parties disagree in the traditional world, what happens? It gets hashed out behind closed doors. This is not a public bloodbath, which is what we're having now. The thing is with crypto, it's open. Everybody can see the disagreements. Everybody can actually, if they want to vote for a side that they believe should be winning, everybody has that choice. This is no different from a board meeting. The only difference is this is not behind closed doors. We are talking
Sight.
Exactly. We're talking about upgrading what we all here see as the future of money. And that is what I believe, exactly what Michael said. There's bigger agendas at play. The stuff we are talking about today is really going to change what we do and see as crypto. What David said, right now is an amazing time to be in crypto. We're testing the true mechanics of the consensus rule. There should only be the winner. Right now, whoever wants to invest enough, at one point, someone's going to have to say, you know what, I'm starting to bleed a bit here. I'm going to have to start easing up.
Yeah.
And that is just going to show who's willing to invest more money in their idea and what they believe is correct. So
it's exactly that. Like what Mike said, sometimes you do need a slap across the face to sort of wake up. And a lot of people think that cryptos is just like dandelion fairy tale. It's not. There's not meant to be 5,000 versions of Bitcoin. There's one Bitcoin, and it's survival of the fittest. The losing chain dies, and that's how it's meant to be. And a lot of people are going to get burnt in the process.
There will only be one.
A lot of people will get burnt in the process. One thing I don't agree with is the way exchanges portray their stance, because I think that they misinform people. And essentially, like what's happening with this, the BCH SV and BCH ABC, you're essentially betting on which one's going to win the hashing war.
Bab as well. We forgot about Bab.
Bab and Woo as well. So you're essentially betting, and a lot of the retail investors who can't read in between the lines will lose their money, and rightly so.
But what you have to look at from exchanges, what is their incentive? Everything here is monetary driven. At the end of the day, every single person in crypto, as whether they want to agree with it or not, they have an incentive, an agenda. some people's incentives and
Incen-
agenda.
incentive is different from malicious intent, though.
Yeah, no, exactly. But exchanges, their incentive is to get the little small trading fees. That's what they want. They're going to list both coins. They don't care which one survives. All their interest is their incentive. If they create a market which is going to get traded, they'll split it, what they see, what they want to do. They're going to cause the volume. They're getting their fees. They don't care what's going to happen when the end one chain wins, and then they're just going to be like, right, great, this is what we're doing.
I don't think it would have happened if, as Steven mentioned, it was more regulated. Like if we take the example of BitMEX right now, it is unregulated market. They have been incorporated somewhere completely outside of the jurisdiction that is legally bound, and they are operating a scheme. This is not a joke, literally a scheme, because we know that what they are offering as a Bitcoin Cash offer and futures is just going to be Bitcoin ABC. So people, by the end of December, this is actually a warning for people who are using BitMEX. You need to be very careful. You need to read what you are putting money on, and it's very, very dangerous. To join on another point that Steven mentioned, I don't think, how to put this to be mild. So,
Don't be mild.
Yeah, put it out there.
so the Bitcoin community has this narrative that it's a cypherpunk movement. But how you can be a cypherpunk movement, anarchist at the same time, and allow your cryptocurrency to be used by everyone freely and to be open, and it's not compatible. It really doesn't work. Like the whole community saying that it's a cypherpunk movement, we are anarchists, we don't agree with the government's decisions, we don't agree with the banking system, financial system. They don't truly understand what banking offers, how it works, and the underlying of banking offerings, and that is really a shame.
Absolutely.
It is really a shame because it is not how banks work, it's the way that the actors who use the banks in a malicious ways. So they are trying to eliminate both with the same stone, but it's not going to work.
Yeah, and then going back to your point, actually, just before we wrap that up, you mentioned the BitMEX futures contract. So me and you looked at this yesterday. So beware for those of you retail investors, because a lot of people are actually investing in this BCH futures contract that settles on 28th of December. And it was hidden. This pop-up was hidden. Well, it's not a pop-up if it's hidden, but I had to click through many pages and somehow found an option that opened another sort of box with a note, and they said this BCH futures contract will support the BCH ABC side of the split and will not support any value of the BCH SV. And people were not actually aware. They thought it's actually BCH futures contract. So people are getting burned already. BitMEX clearly do not care. And so just beware. Yeah, we've touched on obviously a few points. One side of the argument being the block size. Another thing I want to get your opinions on is the whole argument for, there are many things. We're going to have loads of episodes coming out because this cannot be covered in one part. But the first of many arguments is the CTOR, so Canonical Transaction Ordering Rule, versus the TTOR, Topological Transaction Ordering Rule. And the one time I sort of dug into this a bit more, and I'd like to get Davo's thoughts on this as a dev, is that, apologies if I pronounce the name incorrectly, Joannas Vermoral published a paper analyzing both sides of the argument, and a Reddit post by Ormany, which goes into detail about actually CTOR claims so many benefits that are actually untested, and a lot of them will not materialize. So it's too soon to say that, the ABC camp arguing about CTOR, saying it wouldn't actually come out with the benefits that they claim it will do at this point. But what are your thoughts on that? And if you could provide a bit of context for those not too familiar, and your opinion.
The CTOR, the way that Amaury was approaching it is basically going to facilitate a lot of tasks that they want to do for Wormhole as well. But the problem with CTOR is that a lot of software needs to be rewritten. A lot of people who have implemented software there, which are using the current network and relying on the way that how the transactions are basically ordered in a block, they need to be rewritten. There's a lot of backlog of work that needs to be done, and that's the real damage. However, I think Amaury has a point. He's mentioned that this is the type of big changes that you need to do in early stages of a growing product, if I can call Bitcoin that, or an experiment, because you will affect less businesses as it stands right now. If it was widely used, there were a lot of more businesses that needs to go through this whole process of rewriting code, deploying human resources to apply that. So I think he has a point, but also the other side of the argument as a business is that I'm using a product. Why should I be just following day-to-day basis your changes, ad hoc changes, if I can call those, and deploy resources to fix those? I'm a business. I want a reliable chain. And that is what Craig Wright is advocating, base layer, to be sure that everything that you have working will be working going forward without any, maybe you need to do changes. Of course, there's bugs, fixes. These are like common things in the software, but that's what Craig Wright is advocating. And that's kind of, I'm I'm split on this because I do agree that since the product size, this is my tech side talking, since the product size is not very well adopted by the community, you have more impact when you're changing it. It's quicker to adapt, deploy, and people can use it. But I see the bigger picture is like, if you want to bring more people on board to use your product, you need to give them stable ground for them to operate on. That's what Craig Wright is doing.
Cool. And then just another topic. Obviously, I've been in this space for 3 months and I'm just taking notes all day. So there's a lot of knowledge being fired at me right now. Another thing that obviously we were discussing this earlier, I wanted to get your thoughts on is twofold actually, this question. One is sort of why is hash rate the best consensus mechanism really at the moment in this case? And secondly, which leads on to if you can touch on the whole concept of this is game theory really, in my opinion. A lot of personal economic incentives at play. People are essentially at war and a lot of pockets are bleeding. You did an analysis of the costs today, which has blown my mind. So if you guys can touch on that, maybe in your opinions on that.
Touch hash.
So, in my opinion, the reason why hash is the most important, when we go back to the Bitcoin white paper, Satoshi wrote and he said, 1 hash, 1 vote. That is how the whole system works. You vote by your hash. This is why Craig Wright is talking about miners and miners needing to step up and actually take their rightful place in the whole ecosystem. So when we are analyzing the system right now as Bitcoin, what makes Bitcoin secure? The fact that it's immutable, the fact that it cannot be changed. Anything subscribed to the ledger is there and it's there indefinitely. The way this is actually achieved is by the fact of all of this hashing power, which, let's be honest, these miners invested very heavily in the early days when Bitcoin was an experiment. It still is an experiment. Now, their votes, they're trying to essentially protect their incentives. The network is their incentive. That is what pays the miners. So they're going to do everything they can to protect that incentive.
Just to add on that, again, to look at this on a bit of a more primitive layer and level, is why does the miner perform that role? Really ponder that question. And that to me is one of the key and main genius aspects of what Bitcoin is. Why is that? Because you have really nailed down human social behavior and giving yourself a very highly accurate probabilistic outcome through economic incentives. And it's as simple as this. We are very diverse as a global collective, right? We've got different cultures, we have different religions, we have different beliefs in the plethora of different avenues as to what it is to be human, right? The one thing that we can all agree on right now, whether we like it or not, is that we all need money to buy bread and eggs. Whether you're in Afghanistan or America, you need money to buy bread and eggs. So off that basis, that's one of the core primitives in this modern human condition, right? So what Bitcoin has done and what the original founders have done is they have tapped into that need. And they said, okay, we're going to utilize that. We're going to take human beings' desire to profiteer, ultimately greed, and we're going to commoditize it, and we're going to turn that into a security model. So you've now got a scenario in a network that basically no one's willing to set fire to their own wallet. And we're going to see just how much and how deep these wallets go. And I want to leave the audience with an image that they can maintain and relate to and reference back to as this hash was transpiring, because this can go on forever, right? Well, not forever, but this can go on for a long period of time. This ain't a one-day thing. This can go on for weeks. This is going on for potentially months. Now, this is a game of tug of war. On the one side, you've got SV, Craig, CoinGeek, Enchain. On the other side, you have a fragmented conglomerate. You've got ABC, you've got Jihan, you've got Bitcoin.com, and you've got small pockets all around the place. And a lot of the hash power that they're going to be utilizing isn't even their hash power, it's rented hash power, right? And arguably, questionably, legally borrowed hash power. So as they're playing this game of tug of war, I know Craig is never letting go of that rope. He is never letting go of that rope. It doesn't matter how much these guys want to tug. He's never, ever, ever, ever letting go of that rope. And I don't understand, irrespective of how people feel about him on a personal level, I still don't see how common sense hasn't prevailed. This guy is allegedly a fraud and fake Toshi. He speaks technobabble. Now he's managed to, in a matter of months, put together a client, get together the necessary hash power. He understands, and they are fighting a good fight. And he believes in what it is that he is doing. And he's willing to see it through, and he will deploy billions to make this happen. They already have structured themselves in that way. So that then leads to the question, why is it so important right now for the ABC side to keep hold of the rope? Why is C2OR that important? Why is maintaining 32 megabytes that important? Remember, we've already done test of scaling way beyond 32 megabytes. Successful test of scaling way beyond 32 megabytes. Why is it so important? And this is really the narrative that people should stay on and keep jabbing and picking at. Look into Bitmain and ask yourself that question. Why is he going to hold on to the rope? Look into ABC Amri. Why is he going to hold on to the rope? Look at Roger Ver, Bitcoin.com. Why is he going to hold on to the rope? And how long for? Because are they going to spend billions to introduce CTOR?
No, not in my opinion. It's exactly what you said. It's that Stackelberg game theory. There's always a first mover. And I think Craig's been very, very strategic at this moment in time. But like you said, the balance sheet doesn't lie. From our own internal analysis, we know Bitmain have massive, massive liabilities, regardless of their token holdings. That could even be why we've seen some sort of selling pressure. Do they have to sell tokens to pay off these short-term liabilities or not? One thing that I firmly agree with you is Craig's hands are super glued and handcuffed whilst being sellotaped around that rope. They are not coming off. Yeah, I'm firm they're not coming off. And I think there's going to be a big, big shock to the industry when the flippening does happen.
Yeah, I mean, we haven't even spoke about a reorg attack. I mean, everybody here is thinking, oh, great, we're 30 blocks ahead, we're doing great, we're winning. I mean, right now, who knows? Is there somebody shadow mining ABC? Now, I know they're trying to implement Checkpoint, but as far as it's not been implemented, we're probably still quite a while away from that coming in play.
Yeah,
so
it has only been released today.
So
they didn't even.
Just on that point as well, just another potential game theory scenario out there is Bitcoin.com borrowed hash power, right? And it said within 24 hours we're going to borrow this hash power, right? Every block stamped, confirmed by Bitcoin.com on that borrowed hash power is legal evidence, immutable legal evidence that you took something that you shouldn't have taken. Especially if one of those stamps happened outside of those 24 hours. So go ahead, because you're stamping, you're telling us legally what you have done in order to try and win this tug of war. And this is what I mean. They don't have the incentives aligned with a deep bank balance. Bear in mind, do some DD on Calvin Air and his stance and his position and his liquidity, right? Let alone just Craig, just two guys, right? They're aligned. These are friends, brothers in arms, doing something to make the world a better place. They're going to use tactics, cheap tactics that aren't even their own tactics, in order to try and maintain and keep hold of that rope. So like these are things that need to be factored in as well, because whereas one, you got Roger Ver on camera like laughing, claiming victory, and all these people like thinking that they're claiming victory, maybe this was part of a plan. Maybe you are stamping these blocks and that has now become legal evidence. Maybe you're going to be served soon. How long are you going to keep hold of that rope if you're being served? You want to try and start giving him the rope back. I say, sorry, mate, just back off.
But you're going to have to give that hash power back at one point. I mean, you cannot, if that is not yours, how long can you maintain that? How long can you actually borrow this hash power for? That's the real question. I think we've all established that Craig's and nChain's hash power belongs to them. So that's a big question. How long can borrowed hash power stay? I mean, is Jihan using S15s that are going to be shipped in December? You know, there's no way to find out. But if that's the case,
There's a high probability of that being the case.
then December.
We haven't got confirmation, but I think that's a high probability.
Then we might see in December the hash and power drop. I mean, if the hash and power starts to drop closer to when these miners start to get shipped, we know he's now just shutting down some farms, cleaning up some fans. I mean, this is something that's happened before with the Chinese manufacturers. They used to not even bother cleaning. They used to send the miners with dust in the fans. I mean, this is stuff that a lot of people in the early days of Bitcoins we're very used to. You'd be waiting a year on the waiting list and you get your machines used.
Avalon, right?
Yeah,
Is it
Avalon.
G-hash mining.
Yeah, that's it. G-hash mining.
And even if they're not
Butterfly.
using those, they're borrowing. In order to borrow in an ethical manner, you've got to incentivize someone by sticking on a premium more than they
But
would make.
I thought about this, right? So in order for them to make it okay, you pay over the odds to silence people.
Yeah.
But if I thought that this was a possible scenario and this is part of the game theory, I'll be one of those people. And I'll say, you can't pay me off. I'm suing you.
And yeah, and another thing on your point as well, going back to that, and you touched on Bitmain earlier. So I'd actually argue that, well, this is my opinion anyway. So some say that Jihan's probably got a secret source of funding, whether he does or not. You mentioned the tug of war and Craig never letting go. And I think that Craig and Calvin will continuously push, and they're happy to essentially bleed until they're not going to let go of that. You touched on reorg. I think that's a whole nother discussion that we can save for the next episode. And guys, we're going to come out with loads of episodes, keeping on top of this whole drama that's going on in the industry right now, that has moved the whole market essentially. And shout out to William, who is our creative director behind the production and the cameras and podcasts. He's actually giving us a nudge. So we're going to save the rest of the discussion. There's so much more to discuss. The guys are bursting with excitement to carry this on. We'll save it for next week, where we'll come out with regular updates. But yeah, so just to leave people with a thought, we are probably going to get a lot of dislikes on this because of the stance that we've taken, and we've mentioned Craig Wright and our opinions quite a few times. But people have essentially, it goes back to the wider topic at play here, goes back to education, research, and end of the day, the bigger picture, sight.
Truth stands irrespective of the light shone upon it.
There you go.
Wise words.
We'll leave you with that message. We won't add anything else to it. Please, guys, hit the likes, hit the comments with any feedback, hit the subscribe button, the bell notification button. You'll be able to catch us on YouTube, iTunes, and Spotify. And have a great weekend, all. We'll catch you on the next episode. Peace.